Well, yesterday in your speech you talked about the transformative city, and I was immediately reminded of a phrase that Mike Davis coined called magical urbanism, describing the Latino contribution to the transformation of the city. And as you see, I mean, all of these buildings are an incredible reflection of that. You saw the Teresa Roldán Paseo Boricua apartments, and you see this building that you're at, which obviously is back there, the Estancia. When you look at these two buildings, obviously they challenge the very idea of what the minimalists have put out for particularly affordable housing and public housing, which is you just build housing for people's needs. Well, exactly. And so we challenge not only the minimalist theory about urban development in terms of poor people, but we also challenge Maslow, and I'm sure that the alderman is going to probably agree with me, but Maslow developed this whole, he's a psychologist by the way, Maslow developed the whole theory of the hierarchy of needs. And often when we talk about jobs, when we talk about all these things, we talk about the hierarchy of needs. In actual fact, human beings came to understand their world by creating the world through culture. And that meant that in actual fact, we were aesthetic beings. And so everything should inform our aesthetics, our sense of who we are as human beings. That's what culture means. That's what makes us different from the rest of the living things that exist in the world. So with that note, we challenge both Bickerdike and Hispanic housing to rethink what they were doing. And it is because of our challenge that you have a building like that and that you have Teresa Roldán apartments. Why? Because in BCA, we began to talk about not only were we going to engage the imagination of young people in rethinking culture, that they bring with them a sense of their own individuality, but they need a sense of their historical memory. And what all of this does, those flags, everything that's here, it's about historical memory. Without that, it's like in the play or the film, The Fiddler on the Roof, the old man says to the young man, a man without tradition is like a fiddler on the roof. That's exactly what we become. When we talked about urban violence, when we talked about the issues that are impacting this community, we got to talk about not that sense of historical memory.
What the president understands is that we need a holistic approach. We need an approach that restores neighborhoods, that does give the cultural reference points and the respect to communities and their histories and their contributions. We need to build sustainable regions because people are interconnected in ways that they were not when we were growing up, and certainly in the middle of the last century. The old industrial city is not the operative city these days. Now you have core cities like Chicago with related smaller cities, all part of essentially a mega city. And you know, Professor, that we allowed urban sprawl, and now we have to live with it and figure out how to manage it. And the president is cognizant and focused on ensuring that those regions that are made up of neighborhoods that can be sustainable because we invest in smart ways with transportation and housing and ensuring that we reduce the carbon footprint, but that they also have a robust economy that allows that kid who is in the culture and arts program and in the local high school and in this neighborhood of Humboldt Park or Auburn, Gresham, or anywhere else in Chicago or urban America to have the ability to connect to a robust economy that gives them the opportunity that they need. The generation of thinking that allows for permanent or semi-permanent poverty and disconnectedness can no longer remain. And I think that this president brings this perspective that says we are all interconnected. And if a neighborhood is weak, the region starts to weaken. If a neighborhood is strong, the region is strengthened. And the strength comes in affordable housing, quality education, health and wellness, the ability to climb a career ladder, all these things that for too long we're not being paid attention to. We need to take your lead. And I think one of the messages that the president has asked me to carry is probably something that was second nature here in the conversation, which is that people on the ground are the innovators. People in neighborhoods are the innovators. Before the state governments, before municipal governments were coming up with programs, before the national government came up with, you know, the right phrasing for things like faith-based initiatives. I mean, everybody's, you know, that's been happening all across America where people in churches organized in our communities around issues with local merchants. And this stuff is happening. The solutions are happening on the ground. And what we're charged to do is to go out and look at the innovations and say, what are the smart ideas? What are the smart applications that we can bring back and inform the policy making and the budget making going forward? And that's what we're doing.